Hey there! In this video we're going to 3D print and assemble this 4x5 large format camera. It's the scalable field camera designed by Edgar Kech and made available to the public for free. So it's going to be my starting point into large format photography, and I'm going to take you step by step on this journey. Alright, let's go through the list of printed parts for the scalable field camera. And we're starting off with the body, which is the biggest part. Then we are moving on to the front lid. The front lid dovetail. The focusing block, the focusing wheel, the back plate, the locking rails, one original, one mirrored, the locking levers as well, one original, one mirrored, rails, slider, front standard, front standard tilt plates, 2 of these, pulling level plate, pulling levers, one original, one mirrored, a lens board carrier, lens board lower clamp, lens board upper clamp, ground glass frame, round glass clamps, tripod plate, and in case you have a Bellows that has no frames, I also had to print the Bellows front frame as well as the Bellows back frame. Then we also have the non-printed parts list. So we've got here the bellows, we have the focusing rod, we have the T6 nut, we have the flange coupler, M5 threaded rod, M520 screw, M510 knurled nuts, M510 or up to 12 screws with knurled heads, M512 up to 16 screws with knurled heads, M5 press-in nuts, countersunk screws, pre-12, countersunk screws, 210, ground glass, .25mm spring steel wire, .75mm spring steel wire. Alright folks, before we deep dive into the assembly, which will be mostly visual, I would like to mention one more thing. Throughout the assembly process you will notice that I used the side of countersunk screws, also regular screws, combined with brass press-in nuts. These screws are M2 and they just appeared less destructive from an assembly point of view compared to countersunk, that's why I used them. They were not listed in the non-printed parts list, so just keep that in mind. Regarding the assembly, the biggest part here was really the bellows. So getting it glued and worked out was a little bit of a challenge for me, as I've never done that before. The frame for the Toyo 48A bellows that I've got works for my purpose, however it was not perfectly just fitting in, easy to glue, and that's it. There was more material than just sliding it into the frame. So what happened is I had quite to do a little bit of work to get my head around that situation. To some extent I was cutting in the bellows where I found necessary. In some areas I've been folding it where I had too much material, and I also tried several glues here, but I would not recommend going with the gel glues. Just go with the super glues that are more fluid, that work the best in my opinion. One more thing worth mentioning is that the frames that I've got for the bellows, these frames consist of two pieces at the end near the ground glass and at the front near the front standard. What I ended up doing with those frames is, for the larger frame, which is at the rear part of the camera, the inner part of it, the thin frame, I cut it into two pieces and reduced in the center some material. So whatever bellows material was basically overlapping or so, had a little bit more space to breathe. And the rest of that inner frame I glued to the bellows part from the inside basically. For the frame that then connects to the front standard and is being closer to the lens, which is also smaller, I left out that small inner frame completely and just glued the bellows to the outer frame, which is then being connected to the front standard. I believe that works alright. I will need to see that during the testing, but it's just making it obvious that they're not just easy to slide in and glue and that's it. Also, depending on your supplier, it might say Toyo 45A, however, there might be deviations in parameters, so the frame might be too big, too small. It really also depends on the bellows supplier. So just keep that in mind while you're going through the process. As I'm fast forwarding this part, in case you have any questions or you feel you've missed something, feel free to raise any questions in the comments. Alright folks, so here is the final product after printing and assembling. I'm quite happy with the way it worked out. I have no clue if it's gonna be functional and working, but it already looks quite good by the first impression, so I'm quite happy about that. There are a couple of things maybe worth mentioning as we have a look at this camera. So I did use countersunk screws, especially in the tripod area, as well as for the focusing ring. But I also used screws in combination with press-in nuts. Actually, I tried to use them as much as possible. It felt somehow less destructive compared to countersunk screws. Also, the spring wire that I've been using here, it's the thicker one of the two, for holding the back plate and the ground glass. It's quite strong, I must say, so there's quite some pressure on it. And also worth mentioning, I've seen on several images of people who printed this camera, they kept those wires longer, but I cut them off after putting the ground glass on, because they felt kind of sharp and pointy, so just felt more comfortable that way. However, thinking through the design, I started realizing that it might have been a bad idea, so if you're gonna do that, you better keep them longer out. And in a future video, when I'm going to test this camera, you will understand why it's better to keep those wires longer. Alright, so let's open it up and unfold it. So you have to turn the focusing ring that will make the rail go up and down. So in our case, we want it to go down and therefore then unlock the lid from the main body. It's a pretty smart mechanism to actually close the camera as well as open up. In combination then, when using the camera, to have the same button being used for focusing purpose. What you will also notice when opening up this camera, you see that the front standard is not in balance. So it seems from the front view on leaning to the right. So on the left, the gap is bigger than on the right. And this is mostly because of the way how I've been gluing the bellows to the frame for the front standard. So I think I didn't glue it perfectly. However, I don't think this will impact the usage of the camera actually. So as long as the image circle of the lens is large enough, there shouldn't be really much of a problem. I don't worry too much about it for the time being. So in practice, it will show if there is any issue with that. So what you need to do then next to unfold the camera or put it in working position is you need to put the front standard into the rail. You also see here the other thinner spring wire, which is supposed to put some tension on those levers to lock the front standard in one of those positions that are predefined here. However, they're not just locking in, so you have to actually put them in there. But the good thing is about these wires, they also don't just keep it all loose, so it gives you some stability in that sense to keep the front standard in the position that you want. Once you lock it in there, you can then also fine tune the focus with the focusing wheel. Also worth mentioning, you see this T6 brass nut here for the focusing rod. Well, in the assembly video you see that I just cut it off from one side to make it fit in. However, you actually need to cut it off from two opposite sides because it's just too much material when you close the whole camera. And what I also played around with is to not screw it in, but this is not something that will work, so you have to screw it into the holding part where it fits in, because if you don't do that, it might happen that when you open and close the camera and you have to use the focusing wheel to lock the lid, due to some tension it might happen that it will push actually out that brass item from its position, which you don't want. So just use a countersunk screw, for instance, to fix it and keep it in position. Yes, so that's about it. It was quite a lot of fun to print and assemble all these parts. And yeah, that's where this video will end. I'm gonna create another one where I actually will test out the camera, but for that I need some more items like a lens and also ways to put some negatives on the back, which I don't have yet. So stay tuned. In case you have any questions or any remarks, put it in the comments, let me know. More than happy to get some feedback. That's it. Another video will be coming out soon related to this project, one of the next parts. Thanks for watching.